it's Katie with Ria Health, and today I am here with Heather Serody. She is a natural health and wellness consultant for midlifers who specializes in low-carb nutrition. Heather is actually also somebody who changed her relationship with alcohol by using the medication Naltrexone. She wrote an incredible 3-part series blog detailing her experience, which I will link below. And I'm excited just to chat more with her today about that experience. So Heather, I really, really appreciate you taking time to speak with me. I'm really honored. And if it's all right with you, I'll just dive into the first question.
Sounds great. Thanks for having me.
Yes, you bet. So, okay, in your blog, you address the notion of overdrinking, which you describe simply as a place where you find yourself drinking more than you want to. Now, this isn't full-blown alcohol addiction, but alcohol is still impacting your overall well-being. And for me, I really think this is an important point that you make because a lot of people find themselves here just like you did. You know, you're not able to be fully in control of your relationship with alcohol. So can you describe what the dialogue was like inside you when you began to question your own over drinking?
Yeah, it's definitely an uncomfortable place to be. I kind of found myself in the situation when back decades ago when I was a smoker, and I thought, well, I think it's time to stop. And then you'd try to stop, and then you'd have that yearning for more. So it was the same with alcohol. For the longest time, I enjoyed drinking and would drink regularly, but kind of during the week, I would just kind of forget about it, wouldn't really be front of mind. And then in my mid-30s, I noticed that I would kind of be thinking about having another glass, even though I had told myself, well, I'll just have one with dinner or maybe 2 on a Friday night or Saturday night. And I just thought, wow, that's interesting. And sometimes I was able to leave it, sometimes I wasn't. And then slowly over the years, I could see where that thinking of having another glass would become more and more persistent. And that was the place that I found very, very uncomfortable because I was trying to white knuckle it too much and I needed to figure out what was going on with my brain.
Wow, that's so interesting. So it happened gradually for you, but you did start to notice it even though it was gradual.
Yeah, I did. It's an insidious thing that from the perspective of a 48-year-old, I can look back and see how slowly over the years, and especially with, I would say, stressful events in life like moving or grief, loss of a parent, you can kind of lean on alcohol a little bit, and which we all do. I mean, we're all human. It's very common. There's no shame in that. However, if you're already progressing toward leaning on it a little bit too much, it's very hard to come back from a period in which you've leaned on it even more, because then the desire becomes more, and it's harder and harder and harder to pull yourself back from it.
Yeah, I can totally resonate with what you're saying. And I know so many people here at Ria too, who they're okay, but then they encounter a stressful life event and then like everything's out the window and it's totally loss of control from there. So I know you have 2 sons and you realized you were using wine or alcohol as a way to cope with really, trying to do it all, that type of mentality. What are your thoughts on the mommy wine culture and alcohol being marketed to moms as a way to cope with stress and momhood and life in general?
Well, like all successful marketing campaigns, they're always rooted in some kind of truth, right? I mean, we are all, I'm sorry, my dogs are here.
That's okay.
Moms are still, especially stay-at-home moms, do have, but at the end of the day, these kind of stresses that build up. And now that I have teenagers, I look back at that time and I do see how stressful it was for me. And a glass of wine at the end of the day really does kind of take the edge off if that's how alcohol reacts with you. So, I don't have a problem with the mommy wine culture, but I do believe in 100% accountability. So the only time I believe there's a problem is if you're wanting to drink less than you actually are. So it's a personal thing that affects everybody individually, and no one standard for one woman is the same standard for another woman. It's all individual, and I know that it can be kind of dicey to have this conversation because certain people can feel like, well, they're being judged for how much they drink based on somebody else drinking less. So I try to frame it very individually. I believe that we all know what's right for us, and if we're at a level at which we're not really happy. So, I mean, you can overdo all kinds of things that are stress relieving, including over-exercising, doing too much yoga, restricting food, things like that. So, you know, it's all an individual based criteria that we have to decide for ourselves what is healthy for us and what is not.
Totally. I think you said it so well there because, you know, for myself, because I had my own alcohol dependence and used naltrexone as well. And it was hard for me to decide whether or not I had an alcohol problem because I was drinking the same amount as everyone around me, but that was beyond what I felt was reasonable for myself. And so just what you're speaking to, that it's so individual and it's really up to you to do that self-inquiry to see, okay, is this okay with me or do I want to be drinking less? So I appreciate you for making that point.
Yeah, and I've always said, you know, you have to give yourself permission to stumble along this journey that you have with alcohol if you're uncomfortable, and you have to give yourself permission to do it imperfectly and try all kinds of different things. There's no one way that works best. It depends on where you are in your life, you know, your level of discomfort, and sometimes we reach a place where we decide we need more help than just what we can do ourselves, which is what happened with me.
Totally.
Mm-hmm.
So when you realized you were using wine to cope, you stopped drinking during the week for 10 years. You talk about how you would beat yourself up anytime you would, you know, slip up and drink on a weekday. And over time, you felt like it was chipping away your own self-regard. Can you speak more about this experience and what it was like for you?
Yeah. Well, let me clarify that.
Sure. Yeah.
For 10 years, I wanted to not drink during the week, but I did drink during the week. So it was this constant, I mean, sometimes I'd be successful. I mean, I did quit drinking for 6 months at a time, 2 different times. And, you know, I did keep it pretty tight, but I'm an incredibly disciplined person. And when I feel like I want to do something, I kind of expect 100% compliance with myself. I'm just that kind of type A person. So when I wasn't actually complying with what I wanted by not drinking during the week, it really bothered me. Now, some people, maybe that doesn't bother them, but this constant, like, oh, I said I wasn't going to drink, but it was Real Housewives reunion and I had 2 glasses of wine, and why did I do that? And it's this constant volley back and forth in your head between what you want for yourself and how you're disappointing yourself. And over time, it really does, for me anyway, it affected my belief in what I could affect in my own world. And it ended up, and I ended up in a place where I really doubted my capability, and it was like a lot of shame and self-blame that I was giving myself. And eventually, thank goodness, I decided I couldn't live with that anymore.
Yeah, it's exhausting, the internal chatter that's just the conflict constantly. It's exhausting.
Yeah, because you think about it and you're like, you're wondering if you have a problem, whatever that means. You're researching alcohol. What is alcoholism? And we still, you know, there is no one maybe definition for everybody that applies. So you're kind of caught between this place between traditionally thinking, well, am I an alcoholic and I have to go to AA and never drink again? But you don't really feel like that applies to you, but you're not really sure that you're being successful just by yourself in trying to either cut down or plan ahead for drinking. I mean, there's other things you can do. And I was doing all those, but eventually I reached a place where I needed more than just what I could do myself.
Yeah. And so when you decided that you wanted to change your relationship to alcohol, like you said, you were having maybe a glass or two of wine a day. So this isn't a ton of alcohol, but you were still realizing that it was holding you back in life. And in society, we have this rock bottom mentality where you're either, a full-blown alcoholic or someone who doesn't have an alcohol problem. And I think your story highlights perfectly that that's not always the case, just as you were talking about. And alcohol can still be controlling us, even if it hasn't, destroyed us or majorly impacted our lives in any way. Can you speak a bit more about this?
Yeah, I definitely, there's something internal in my own personality that always said that I was never going to allow alcohol to completely control me. So I was always, for my whole life, from the age of 21 on this real tightrope, because alcoholism runs in my family. I saw it really affect my family growing up, and caused a lot of insecurity in myself growing up, and also left this impression that I'm vulnerable to it happening to myself. So that's probably why I was so hard on myself growing up, like intently kind of watching myself, making sure I never drank to get drunk. However, I still had this very uncomfortable relationship with wanting to drink more than I was drinking, even though for all appearances, I was in control. I was never out of control. I wasn't blacking out. I think there are a lot of women and men in the world who find themselves in this place and quietly suffer. And that's why I wrote the series, because there's a lot of good information out there about things you can do yourself, but also naltrexone really is a wonderful answer for people who were in my position, who have a brain dependence on alcohol and just need a little bit more help. And what that did was it kind of freed me, because I'm now more a year plus into taking naltrexone, and it's like a little bit of an insurance policy. That fear I had about becoming an alcoholic is now gone, and I can't tell you what kind of freedom that is mentally for me. It's like 20 pounds has been lifted from me. It's really amazing.
I just got chills as you said that. Like I can feel, I know what you're talking about, and it's incredible. I think of naltrexone like training wheels. Like it wasn't like the end all be all. I still needed to, kind of have my own mindfulness and awareness with it, but it like definitely took me to where I wanted to go in changing my relationship to alcohol.
How long did it take you to feel like you were depending on alcohol or wanting it less on naltrexone?
It was up and down. Like I would have some drinking sessions where I would I'd drink 2 glasses as opposed to a bottle or 2 and be like, wow, that's amazing. And then other times I would still drink at my normal limit, depending on if I was drinking because of stress or having fun or whatever. But I would say, I really saw good results by the end of the first month. I was like pretty confident it was going to work for me at that point.
Yeah.
What about you?
It definitely took me 3 months. And I do think that it took me longer than what my research showed was typical. I mean, in that, what is her name? Claudia
Christian's
YouTube video. The way that she explained it was almost like immediate. In her relationship with alcohol changed immediately, but her dependence was much, much greater. So anyway, I do think naltrexone is very personalized to your physiology and where you are on the spectrum of dependence. And I think, we need to say that everybody has their own path, even with naltrexone, even though it's a pharmacological help and it affects your brain. You still have to give yourself time and the ability for it to work with your own body and your own, situation in life.
Yeah, I think that's so important, because Claudia's TED Talk is like one of the most inspiring talks I've ever seen, because it like hit home with me so much. But you know, getting that message out that not everyone is going to have her experience. And I've talked to so many people who feel disappointed or like they're a failure because they didn't have
Right.
that same experience. And so
Exactly.
hearing from people like you, spreading the message that it works, it's not a magic pill, it might take time. I think it's so important to do that.
Exactly. You're still going to have things in life that happen. You know, not everybody is going to want to leave alcohol, like it says in the Sinclair Method, that oftentimes people just walk away from alcohol because they really don't feel the need to drink anymore. Well, that doesn't happen with everybody. And I'm still open for that happening to me. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. But I'm just, you know, you kind of, it's good to have an open mindset with it, I think.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So tell me, how did you learn about naltrexone? I understand, you know, you were doing research to better understand how addiction is habitually reinforced on the brain. Is that right?
Yeah.
You're doing all the research. I could learn a lot from you.
Yeah, I have a very research-based mind. So when I have a problem, I like to just dive into research instead of going like emotional, which really can mess you up and
Yeah.
self-blame. You know, I wanted to understand what was happening in my brain. And this
Yeah.
to me is very interesting as well as a health coach, because I do believe it's the thoughts you think about your life that really do affect the results that you have in your life. And once I learned that alcoholism does affect the physical functioning of your brain, and over time, you know, it's progressive, and you release your serotonin every time you have a drink, and the brain is primal. The brain's only job is to keep you alive and chase that feel-good hit of serotonin. And so, like I said, you can get that from lots of different things. You can get it from sex or food or exercise or alcohol. Anything concentrated form of pleasure is going to give you that. So it was really interesting to me to see the different ways that you could kind of interrupt that addictive pathway. So I was doing more and more research and came across Claudia's YouTube video. And when I heard her explain how the Sinclair Method works to block that serotonin release when you have alcohol, it made perfect sense for me. And it also kind of let me off the hook, because, you know, we have this stigma against asking for a prescription from our doctor, like, you know, we're weak or we need extra help, or, you know, some kind of shame-based thing. But for me, once I learned it was actually, my brain is actually working exactly the way it's supposed to, right? Like primally anyway, it's chasing pleasure. And over time, it needs more and more alcohol to chase that pleasure. It doesn't understand. My brain doesn't understand that I'm over drinking and I don't want to. Its only job is to chase that serotonin. So it made perfect sense for me. And I just said to myself, well, let me experiment with it. What's the worst that can happen? I don't have to stop drinking. You know, you drink while you're starting naltrexone and you continue to drink. So what could it hurt? And that talk with my doctor, admitting that I was needing help, that my drinking was at a place where I was drinking more than I wanted to, and I wanted help, was a real pivotal time for me, because, you know, at some point in life, we all have to lean on other people, ask people for help, and also admit that we're imperfect human beings. And, you know, once you do that, you leave white space for all kinds of different results to happen in your life. And for me, that was like, it was huge.
The way you described in your blog kind of the pleasure reinforcement and how our brain is doing just what it's supposed to do to keep chasing this pleasure, I feel like that clicked with me in a way that nothing has in the past year and a half. I've been learning and researching the Sinclair Method and naltrexone. Can you speak more in depth about this analogy and how it relates to alcohol? And I know you just did a bit, but do you have more to say about that?
Well, I mean, it is interesting, isn't it? This pleasure reward mechanism is always at work in our brains, and that's separate from the thoughts that we think about what we're doing. So there's two separate things going on. There's a physiological response to alcohol, which over time, it is just, this is why alcohol is a progressive disease. over time, every time you have that glass of wine, you get that hit of serotonin. This is the pleasure mechanism of drinking. That's why we feel happy. And what happens is your brain will downregulate those receptors and create more of them, so that over time, 10 years after you start drinking, you need the second glass of wine to get the same feel-good effect. And this isn't a flaw of character, which your mind can chatter at you about. It has nothing to do with that. It is just simply your brain downregulating the feel-good mechanism so that you will chase more and more of the reward mechanisms that over millennia have kept humans alive. We are hungry, we're motivated to chase the lion on the savannah, and then we feel good when we eat, right? Yeah. This is why we want to have sex, right? It feels good. We get a serotonin hit. This is why humans have been able to procreate. It's why my kids can't remember anything except where they put the Oreos, right? Because when they have the Oreos, they get that feel-good hit of serotonin. This is just the human experience. And drinking alcohol is one part of that primal experience that your brain is designed to react to in a certain way. And of course, certain people have different reactions to alcohol. Some people are super sensitive and will feel the effects of alcohol from their first drink. And some people, maybe it takes 30, 40 years for them to think, I'm drinking a little more than I want to. Mm-hmm. So, it's interesting. I think that's always a good response to any problem that you're having or any obstacle in your life. Just kind of step back from it, stop self-shaming, and say, this is interesting. Let's figure out what's going on. And then you can individualize and find your right answer.
Totally.
Yeah.
Now, so I know you tried other strategies like abstinence and drink planning to cut back on your drinking. How did those attempts and experiences compare to what it was like once you started on the naltrexone?
Well, they were a lot of work. When you drink plan, you have to be very organized. You have to know what your week looks like. And for me, being a type A, I meal plan, I could do all that. I know that there's certain people who are like, they have no idea what they're doing tomorrow. So being able to plan your drink at least 24 hours ahead of time, it is successful if you're organized. And it's also successful because advanced planning uses your prefrontal cortex part of your brain. That part of your brain can actually hijack the addictive mechanisms. It's more powerful. This is the advanced planning part of your brain, and that's why it works. But you have to honor your deal with yourself to advance plan. And if you don't plan to drink 24 hours at least ahead of time, then you may not drink. If you drink and you break that kind of promise to yourself within less than 24 hours, then you are reinforcing that addictive pleasure reward mechanism instead of the advanced planning prefrontal cortex mechanism. So it's, this 24-hour rule is not hard and fast, but it's enough that it kicks in that pre-planning part of your brain. And it does take a long time. It's the extinguishing mechanism. So if you stick with that everybody will be different, but I did see a decrease in my drinking. It required a lot of discipline. And again, the ability to be imperfect. So if I would kind of have a drink off my plan, I would just simply journal about it. Hey, why did this happen? Okay, well, this came up and that came up. And then you have to forgive yourself and move on. And again, give yourself permission to do it imperfectly. So that was advanced drink planning. I did practice abstinence twice, as I mentioned. Both times that really worked to decrease my desire for alcohol after I came out of it. But it was also very interesting once I started drinking again, how quickly I got back to the level that I was drinking prior. You would think that it would take 6 months to maybe go back to the level it was at. No, it took maybe 2 months. Wow. So the brain, once it learns different pathways of reward, pleasure mechanisms, it goes right back there. It's like kind of like riding a bike. So,
Don't forget.
Again, yeah. So you throw in a couple of like stressful events in life, and those best intentions to either cut down or stop drinking can be really derailed really fast. And that's where I found myself when I finally looked for something else to help me, and I found naltrexone.
So what was it like when you started on naltrexone, like compared to those experiences before with the advanced planning or abstinence?
Well, it was very strange because the prescription is to drink every single day for about at least 30 days in order to give naltrexone time to block that mechanism. So, having kind of had this internal battle to stop and cut down, and then go to like, okay, well, I guess I'm having a glass of wine every night. It does this reverse psychology thing. And eventually, like after 30 days of having wine every single night, I was like, I really don't want any more wine. It was interesting in that way. And it also, I have to say, when I have a drink or of alcohol on naltrexone, I don't feel the same way as I did without taking it. Now, I mean, you can still become intoxicated or drunk when you're taking naltrexone, but I don't know, maybe you can speak to this too. That kind of warm, fuzzy, buzzy feeling is definitely muted. It doesn't go away, but it does feel different. And actually, I like it because I just feel like it's working, and I can depend on naltrexone working in the background to break that cycle, and I know that I'm free from it.
Yeah, and I know on your blog, I wanted to read, you said it was almost like taking naltrexone removes the kryptonite effect of alcohol on my body and brain. And that so describes it perfectly. It allows me to be more present and engaged in the situation I'm in, because before naltrexone, I was thinking about the drink and the next drink. Like that's where my mind was at. But with naltrexone, I can really just like enjoy this one drink in front of me. Maybe I'll have another, maybe I won't, but I'm not even thinking about that. And so it removes that like more kind of like thirst that comes with alcohol.
I call it looping thinking, the circuitous looping thinking, where you're thinking about the next drink or I want more. It interrupts that. And, I'm still surprised when I'll get distracted in the evening, say I'm having a glass of wine, and I realize that I've actually got up, gone to bed, and the full glass of wine is still sitting on the table. It's just like, yes!
I know.
Before that would have never happened. I would have always finished the wine. And now just this feeling that, I can take it or leave it is just wonderful.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. You talk about how you realized that the habit of drinking wine gave you permission to relax and enjoy yourself. You notice a pattern in yourself of overdoing many things in life and getting to a place where you need relief from that. So can you speak a bit more about this realization and what it meant to you?
Yeah. I guess I'm now a year into naltrexone. I can see, looking back, that, indulging in that glass of wine what was definitely serving that purpose. It's like, wow, I'm going to give myself permission to sit down, go online or do something relaxing, watch TV. I associated the wine drinking with giving myself permission to relax. And it became almost like I had to have the wine in order to justify the relaxation, when the reality is that we always can give ourselves permission to take a break, do some meditation, be good to ourselves. We don't need to have anything to accompany that. And like I mentioned before, when I was younger, a couple decades ago, and smoking cigarettes, I was waitressing in a restaurant, and it was long hours, and I associated with having the cigarette with being able to just take 5 minutes to stop working and have my break. And I can see the similarity between the two, and the fact that they're also both addictive. So, so, I see this within myself. The cigarettes or the alcohol is a symptom of a greater personality type in which I haven't internalized primarily being able to give myself permission to relax. And this overworking is, something that is just part of me and that I have to constantly work on, and hopefully, set myself up in life so that it can just be clear. I don't need the wine. I don't need the cigarette anymore. I'm free from all that. And that is just, that's just part of my karmic wheel. I've got to be able to dial it back and rest. And I think there's a lot of people like me out there in the world. And if you can recognize that in yourself, you can kind of untangle that web where you can see that wine or alcohol is something that is brain-based, and there are things that you can do to help yourself. And then there's also coaching that you can do with your own self to help yourself come to a place where you're just more at ease with your life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think too, in my experience, at least, it's kind of like you're having to learn new self-care practices or new ways to kind of be with yourself and allow yourself to unwind. And it's subtle, and it might feel awkward at first when you're so used to going to the wine or different alcohol for relaxation. But as soon as you start to kind of implement these new habits, it really does actually feel relaxing. Where the wine, unless I was like really moderating it, it was hardly relaxing me because I'd often just overindulge. But doing different things that are really kind of simple and just ways to even just doing nothing, like that's so relaxing. But you kind of got to get in another habit of doing it.
Right. Exactly. I agree.
So how have you changed since you started taking naltrexone? How has it, impacted other areas of your life?
Oh my gosh. Well, I would say it's sort of like anytime you've done something that you're proud of, whether it's graduating from college or getting a certification or I don't know, any kind of big thing that you work hard for, it has a momentum to it. So, in my personal life, I've been making changes. With my kids, I've asked them to step up, become more responsible for themselves, less of a load on their mom. They're doing their own laundry, little things like that. Where, again, it harkens back to that idea where I'm doing too much for other people and not enough for myself. And I can see where that led to a thinking that led to an overdependence on alcohol. So if you can stand in your own power and ask for what you need for people transparently and honestly and with caring and compassion, I think that automatically you will not feel as though you have to reach for relief from things that ultimately maybe you're uncomfortable with. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's reached all parts of my life, and I'm constantly trying to upgrade, get rid of that which does not serve me, constantly maybe doing a little bit of an inventory in my relationships and my relationship with work, my relationship with myself, my physical relationship, how, working out or doing my yoga, my meditation, making sure that I'm making myself a priority on a daily basis really helps a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really important.
Mm-hmm.
I guess, just to wrap up with our last question, what would you say to people, men and women out there who might be struggling with over drinking? What would you say to them with the new perspective you have now over a year in on naltrexone and changing your relationship to alcohol?
Well, I would say, treat yourself kindly. I would definitely say, visit my blog and read my 3-part series, because I go over all of the different techniques that I used. Be open to using whatever you think works well for you, whether that means asking right away for naltrexone or trying to do it on your own. Or even, if you're thinking that you might have more of a dependence and going to AA, just go to a meeting, see if maybe that resonates with you. You have to find your own answer, and you have to give yourself permission to try different things And if it's not working, then you can try something else. But if you need help, reach out. You know, I'm always there to be emailed. I know that you have like this great service and repository of information. And also speak about your experience to people that you trust. Things always have more power over you if you keep it to yourself. If you can share your experience, which is what I try to do on my site transparently, give yourself permission to be imperfect, you'll find so much support and you will find the answers that you're looking for.
Thank you so much, Heather, for taking time to chat today. I'm going to link, again, your 3-part series down below in the description box for anyone who wants to read about Heather's experience with changing her relationship to alcohol and the methods she tried and what it was like going on naltrexone. So thank you again, Heather, and I hope you have a wonderful day.
Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure.
Bye.
Bye.